There's been a lot of activity attempting to illegally backdate stock and lie about it. And I've caught it too many times for it to just be a coincidence. Even if there was some sort of virtual reality and I've been specially accepted, that's not any excuse, right? Most recent reports show pictures of Dmitry Medvedev in the Bay Area at a variety of events, including one that happened in the East Bay at, I believe, Stanford. And then there was supposed to be a consortium, including a group of technologists that were from the former Soviet Union, specifically from Russia. And he was in town for dealing with some sort of cooperations, perhaps involving technology changes or matters related to Silicon Valley. He was dressed in the event at Stanford, where there were actually very prominent Americans also present, in a suit that I would visualize myself wearing for a very protracted period of time, for almost a year. And it turns out that during that time frame where I was having these visualizations of myself wearing a suit that looked just like the one he did, except I had a tie, right? I wore the tie. He wasn't wearing the tie at that point in time. They were doing major revisions to the Houston Medical Campus, the medical center in Houston, Texas. And the named references on the centers that were getting some sort of overhaul and that were being included in the bond that was issued, one for 2006 and another one for 2008 or 2009. I got the prospectuses, I got the information, right? That during that time frame, I wasn't even in the city. I was in Chicago, but there were all of these transactions that it seems got set up. And a lot of people now have been availed of very specific things that I visualized, that I created with my imagination when I was off the clock, so to speak. I've just spent a month listening to people vilify my former colleague, including me, because of the things that were actually literally required, I think, of the kind of professional relationship we had that were not followed up on, right? I am not accepting that while the president of Russia dressed like I was for over a year, while somebody else was setting up a bunch of deals and not even letting me know about it and lying about it ever since, that were supposed to be coded to a medical center, which, by the way, would have been different. It would have been different if you had allowed me to actually learn about compliance or to learn about healthcare law and patients' rights. That's not what you wanted. Repeatedly, over and over again, you want to make me a consumer that somebody else can advocate for poorly. And you want to use me for product development without even assuring that the products you're developing are going to have enough integrity as a product to not be completely disastrous. You already knew better. There's no way you can go through the protracted process you have, and there's no way you can appropriate from psychological operations that were performed under actual military chains of command and then think you're going to apply them and get away with it. It reminds me of what I read about in that book concerning the Hubble telescope, where there was a civilian group of people working on the Hubble telescope. And every once in a while would engage in consultations with people in the defense sector who had already done work on very advanced telescopic technology, including in connection with satellite technology we don't really hear about, right, in the media. And at some point after the Hubble telescope got launched, they realized that there was a problem. And they were talking to the people in the military, like, yeah, we know. We dealt with that ourselves. The whole thing was, well, why didn't they tell us about that to begin with? Well, what else were they working on that they knew at the time they should have done differently? That they should have actually applied certain standards or policies in order to demonstrate that they could cognizantly engage with the level of information they felt they were entitled to have, or the level of access or exposure they thought they were entitled to engage. I mean, that might be far-fetched, right? But it's been over 10 years, and every single thing you've done with my life in the last 10 years that had any actual validity, you won't acknowledge. And what you've tried to re-engineer as the reality I'm supposed to accept is completely fraudulent, completely illegal, and completely useless. And that is what you're duplicating, and that's what you're trying to redistribute to other people. Even if I agreed to understand, well, I mean, transitions take time, and those people in the gas and oil sector aren't actually malevolent. When they started using uranium as a derivative for engaging in acts of sexualized violence as a form of hedging strategy in the beginning of the 80s, no. and doing it through a federal agency. No. And trying to justify it because they were trying to undermine the Soviet Union during the Cold War. No. I mean, that's just a cultural thing. It's not culture. It's complete slander, it's complete fraud, and it's useless. Nothing you have done since March 24th of 2010 has any legal standing. And that also involves whatever you did at the Supreme Court to try to cover it. Why? Because we're going on now, how many years now? 5 years since you strategically murdered the first justice of the Supreme Court, and not a goddamn person said anything about it. It wasn't a state secret. Even if you allowed to be classified as state secret, the actual operationalization of the act of murder and the murder weapon and the specific contract and the subsequent contract set up based upon testing that technology to actually murder him never had any legal standing. None of it did. Nothing since March 24th of 2010 was legally binding. Period. You've defaulted so significantly, nothing since then has any legal binding. That means we have over a decade, globally, over a decade of fraud so significant that we're just going to have to redo the whole decade. We're going to have to redo the whole decade. And I don't know, because you guys decided you were going to go after kids. You were going to start harvesting hormones of kids. Some of those kids have had 10 years of their hormones harvested for what? It's irreparable damage. It's irreparable. They'll never get that back. We will never get that back. At some point, we're going to have to deal with the hard, cold reality. You wanted to make me, in my prime, having literally nobody else to talk to but a person who engages with the capacity of somebody that would not be legally eligible to stand trial for the kinds of crimes you want me to believe that he personally is responsible for. That's what you did with the last 10 years. None of it has any legal standing. You have a very short window of time to start recapitulating yourself, because I have absolutely no indication that anybody currently moonlighting as if they're legitimately qualified to be in public office, including people that were in public office and have maintained their office since 2010, are actually qualified to say they're Americans. You're not. None of you are. We need a reset. You need to have a recall. What you need to do is you need to have a vote of no confidence or the constitutional equivalent, and we need to do this shit again. You should have already gotten the point in 2018. You are not getting away with this. It really sucks. We've completely lost over a decade worth of things globally. We have an entire generation of people that have been completely harvested to the point of having practically such severe damage that it's going to have global implications. But you don't get to fucking throw COVID-19 out there as a cover up and think you're going to get away with it. Your timeline passed. Your timeline passed. This isn't about a reset. Whatever's left of the documentation is going to have to be exhumed, and we're going to prosecute. Prosecute severely.